Elena didn't mean to cry that night. It just happened. Quiet, exhausted tears in a kitchen that hadn't seen a working light bulb in weeks. The anniversary of her husband's death always pulled the floor out from under her, but year two felt heavier. Maybe it was the bills stacked like a small wall beside the toaster. Maybe it was Maya sleeping in the next room with a cough Elena couldn't afford another clinic visit for. Maybe it was simply the weight of pretending to be strong for too long. She held her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The habit was familiar. Send a voice message to the number that used to belong to her husband. She knew no one was there, knew it was pointless, but the act itself felt like a breath she couldn't take any other way. "Hey," she whispered. "Rent's late again. I'm doing my best. Maya misses you. I miss you. I'm tired. I don't know how much longer I can keep holding everything together." She hit send before she lost her nerve. Across the city in a penthouse that looked more like a museum than a home, Julian Ether tapped through diagnostics on an old test phone his team used to check network latency. A notification appeared, a voice message. Wrong number, clearly. He pressed play anyway. A woman's voice, raw, honest, too tired to hide it, filled the quiet room. Something in him stilled. He had heard desperation before, in corporate negotiations and boardrooms, in last-minute investor calls. But this wasn't business. This was heartbreak in its purest form. He should have deleted it. Instead, his thumb hovered and he found himself whispering out loud, almost instinctively, "Everything will be all right." Then he replied with the same words. Elena stared at the message on her screen. Pulsing, a stranger had answered her ghost, and by morning he would turn her entire life upside down. Elena barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, that message replayed in her mind. "Everything will be all right." A stranger had said it, but it hit her harder than anything she'd heard in years. By sunrise, she convinced herself it was nothing, a kind mistake, a moment she misread. Life didn't change because someone texted back. But life was already shifting in a place she couldn't see. Julian walked into the Ether boardroom with a calmness he didn't feel. The long table was already filled, executives in tailored suits, tablets glowing, tensions simmering quietly between smiles. Marcus Thorne, COO and self-declared future king of the company, tapped his pen with the eagerness of a man waiting to pounce. The family attorney cleared her throat. "Julian, the voting trust agreement expires at midnight before your 35th birthday. If you are not legally married at that moment, your classified shares revert to standard voting rights." She slid a document across the table. "In simpler terms," she continued, "you lose control of Ether." Marcus leaned back, fingers steepled, doing a poor job hiding his satisfaction. 24 hours, Julian. A marriage license isn't something you file like paperwork. Even you can't negotiate time." Julian didn't flinch, but his hands tightened around the folder. He had built Ether out of the ashes of his father's empire. He wasn't about to hand it to Marcus, the man who treated loyalty like an outdated concept. He needed a solution. He needed someone he could trust. And in his mind, without warning, came the voice from last night. A woman carrying more weight than any person should. A woman who didn't ask for anything. Her message had stripped something open inside him. As the meeting dissolved into whispers, Julian stepped out, the city skyline reflecting in the glass. He replayed the voicemail. Her fear, her honesty, the way she tried to hide the cracks in her strength. He didn't even know her name, but he knew one thing. He trusted her voice more than he trusted most people in that boardroom. That afternoon, Elena finished her shift at the hospital's nighttime cleaning crew, mopping floors in a building decorated with glass art she couldn't afford to look at too closely. She tied her hair back, checked her phone, and prepared for the usual routine. Rush home, pick up Maya, count what was left of groceries, and hope it lasted. Then a message blinked onto her screen. "Is this Elena?" She froze. The number. His number. Her thumb trembled. "Yes." "Who is this?" A brief pause. "Julian Ether. You sent me a voice message last night. I'd like to speak to you in person." Her heart thudded violently. She didn't know the name yet, only the unease of a stranger wanting to meet her. "Why?" she wrote. "Because I think I can help." She almost laughed. Help. People didn't just offer that. But then another message arrived. "I'm outside." Elena turned toward the glass entrance of the hospital. A man in a dark coat exited a black sedan at the curb, the winter wind tugging at his hair. He looked nothing like her world, impossibly composed, impossibly calm, like someone used to controlling chaos. He looked directly at her. And in that moment, Elena understood her life was no longer moving in the direction she expected. It was about to collide with his. Elena hesitated at the glass door, gripping the strap of her worn tote bag. Her shift badge still hung around her neck. Her shoes were damp from mopping. This wasn't a moment she felt prepared for. Standing across from a stranger who looked like he'd stepped out of a world built on polished surfaces and unshakable certainty, Julian waited beside the sedan with his hands in his coat pockets, shoulders squared, but not intimidating. More steady, like he'd made a decision hours ago and was only now facing the human part of it. "Elena Harper?" he asked when she finally stepped outside. His voice was softer than she expected, measured with edges worn down from too many nights awake. She nodded. "You're the wrong number." A flicker of something passed through his expression, almost a smile, almost guilt. "Yes, I wanted to talk to you about that." "I'm sorry about the message," she said quickly. "I wasn't thinking straight. You don't owe me anything. You don't even need to respond." "I did respond," he said simply. "That's why I'm here." The wind carried a chill between them, lifting strands of her hair. She tucked them behind her ear, suddenly aware of how exhausted she must look. Julian studied her for a moment, not judging, not pitying, just seeing. "You sounded like someone who's been holding everything together alone for far too long," he said. "I know that tone. I've lived with it myself." She swallowed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm running out of time," he said, "and because last night I heard someone I could trust." Her brow creased. "You don't even know me." "Maybe I don't have to," he replied. "Maybe the truth in your voice told me more than most people tell me in years." She stepped back slowly. "What do you want from me?" Julian exhaled once, slow, as though committing to the next step. "I'm going to say something that will sound strange, maybe even impossible, but I need you to hear it before you walk away." Elena tightened her grip on her bag. She didn't move. He held her gaze with steady, unwavering focus. "I need a wife before midnight. Someone I can trust enough to sign a marriage certificate with." The words hit her like a physical jolt. She stared at him, then at the car, then back at him as if waiting for him to laugh or smirk or reveal a hidden camera crew. But he didn't. He stood there with the kind of seriousness she'd only seen in people who were desperate in ways they didn't admit. "No," she whispered, "this is insane." "I know how it sounds," he said, "but it's not a trick. It's not a trap. There's a legal clause tied to my family's company. I lose control of everything by tomorrow unless I'm married." Her pulse thudded in her ears. "You're asking the wrong person," she said shakily. "I'm asking the only person who hasn't tried to use me," he replied. "Someone who didn't reach out for money or power or influence. Someone who thought she was talking to a dead husband and still spoke with more honesty than I've heard in years." Her chest tightened, breath caught between disbelief and anger. "I don't need charity," she said. "This isn't charity," he said. "It's an offer. And in exchange, I'll take care of your debts, your rent, and Maya's future, not as a favor, as part of an agreement." The mention of her daughter hit a nerve she wasn't ready for. "How do you know her name?" "You said it," he answered quietly, in the voicemail. Her face heated, shame, grief, confusion, all mixing at once. Julian stepped closer, not intruding but grounding the space between them. "You can say no," he said, "and I will walk away, but I need someone who stands on her own feet, someone who doesn't break easily, someone like you." Her heart hammered, her mind raced. Her life had never offered her choices this big, this fast, and she didn't know whether to run or listen. Elena shook her head, stepping back as if distance alone could make the moment less unreal. "You're asking me to marry you," she said quietly. "A stranger in a parking lot after my shift cleaning floors. Do you hear how absurd that sounds?" "I do," Julian answered, "and I'm still asking." She let out a breath that trembled on the way out. "Why me? You're a billionaire. You could walk into any event, point at any woman in the room, and she'd say yes before you finish the sentence." Julian didn't flinch. "And that's exactly why none of them can help me." She blinked, thrown off by the sincerity in his tone. He continued, "I need someone who won't try to leverage my name, someone who won't see me as a ladder, someone who understands the value of something that isn't bought." His gaze held steady, anchored on hers, as if the entire city had gone silent around them. "And last night," he said, "I heard a woman who fights for her life every day, but still talks about her daughter like she's worth the whole world. That's the kind of person I can trust with something this important. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to stay steady. Trust is a big word for someone you met 5 minutes ago. You're right, he said, but honesty isn't. She pressed a hand to her forehead. This is insane. I need to go home. She moved a step around him, but Julian didn't follow. He stayed still, letting her pass, letting her breathe. Just as she reached the edge of the sidewalk, he spoke again, just loud enough for her to hear. Your landlord posted an eviction notice this morning. She froze, her heart plummeted. Slowly, she turned back toward him. How do you know that? Because you deserve to know what you're up against before you decide anything, he said. I didn't send anyone to your building. I checked public filings. That's the only thing I looked up. The humiliation hit first, then fear, then anger. Clean and sharp. You have no right. You're right, he said gently. I don't, and I won't look up anything else unless Reap was to ask me to. But I won't stand here and pretend your life isn't at a breaking point when it is. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. What do you want, Julian? She said. Say it plainly. He walked toward her, not closing in, but closing the emotional distance between them. I want a legal marriage. 1 year. Nothing romantic, nothing personal, unless you choose it. We sign papers. We present it publicly. In exchange, I clear your debts, secure your housing, and set up a fund for Maya's education. You keep your job. You keep your independence. You keep your life exactly as it is, just without the fear. A beat of silence. Cold air rose around them like a wall. And after 1 year, she whispered, we walk away clean, he said. No strings, no expectations. Though she tried to stay strong, her voice slipped. You make it sound simple. It won't be, he admitted, for either of us, but it will be fair. Elena looked down at her hands, calloused from work, dry from chemicals, steady from years of surviving more than she ever told anyone. Then one thought rose above the chaos. Maya, her daughter's face, her future, her chance. She lifted her eyes to Julian. Take me home, she said softly. I'm not giving you an answer yet, but if I'm going to make one, I need to think without this cold wind in my face. A hint of relief flickered in his features, almost invisible. All right, he said, I'll take you home. As they walked to the car, neither spoke, but both could feel the shape of a decision forming. Not a yes, not yet, but no longer a no. The ride back to Elena's building felt different this time. Not quieter, just heavier, as if every passing street carried a question she hadn't dared form into words. Julian didn't speak until they reached her complex. He parked without turning off the engine, giving her space again, letting her choose the moment. I'll wait here, he said softly. Take as long as you need. Elena nodded, stepped out, and walked toward the stairwell. Her legs felt strangely unsteady, like she was moving through a life that no longer belonged to her. Inside the apartment, the air felt stale with last night's fear. Maya was still napping on the couch, one fist curled under her cheek, hair messy and soft. For a long moment, Elena just stood there, looking at her daughter, looking at the eviction notice still folded on the table, looking at the life she'd held together with bare hands for too long. A marriage to a billionaire. By midnight, her breath hitched, half disbelief, half grief for the world she was about to leave behind. She sat beside Maya and brushed her fingers through her little girl's hair. I'm doing this for you, she whispered. For us, for the days I can't keep pretending everything's fine. Maya sighed in her sleep, rolling closer, small hand gripping Elena's shirt. The warmth of it steadied her more than any contract ever could. Elena wiped her eyes and stood. She packed quietly. 2 sets of clothes, a soft blanket, the wooden toy with the chipped edge, a bottle of lavender lotion someone gave her at the hospital last Christmas. Everything fit in one small bag, her entire life condensed. Before leaving, she walked around the apartment one last time, not to say goodbye, but to acknowledge what it had given her. Survival, being memories, and the strength to walk into something unknown. When she stepped outside, the cold air stung her face. Julian was standing by the car now, hands in his pockets again. But when he saw the small bag over her shoulder and Maya's blanket peeking out, something in his posture softened. You ready? He asked. No, Elena answered honestly, but I'm going. He nodded once as if that was the only answer he trusted. She buckled Maya into the car seat Julian had arranged without her asking. A small detail that told her he'd thought ahead, thought of her daughter first. As the car pulled away from the curb, Elena watched the building shrink behind them. Her chest tightened, not with regret, but with the jagged ache of letting go. Julian glanced at her once quietly. "You can back out any time, even now." She shook her head softly. "No, I'm not backing out. I just didn't think my life would change in a day." Julian looked back at the road, voice low. "Mine didn't change for years. Maybe this is what change looks like." The city lights flickered across his profile, sharp angles softened by exhaustion, ambition traced with loneliness. He wasn't offering her a fairy tale. He wasn't promising love. He wasn't pretending this was anything other than survival, his and hers. But for the first time, the world didn't feel like it was suffocating. It felt like it was opening. The courthouse was nearly empty when they arrived. The air was cold enough to bite. The hallways washed in pale fluorescence that made everything feel strangely surreal. A clerk looked up from her desk, surprised to see anyone at this hour, even more surprised when Julian Ether stepped forward with documents already prepared. The process moved fast. Silent signatures, stamped pages, whispered confirmations. Elena's hands trembled only once, when she signed her name beside his. Julian noticed. He didn't touch her hand. He didn't speak. He simply stood close enough that she felt something steady, like standing beside a wall built to hold weight that wasn't hers anymore. 15 minutes before midnight, the final form was stamped. A marriage, not like in stories, not wrapped in vows or flowers, just ink on paper. A lifeline for him, a lifeline for her. When they walked out of the courthouse, the night air felt sharper, cleaner, almost electric. Julian held the envelope with the marriage certificate in one hand. He looked at it the way a drowning man might look at breath. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, the cold gnawing at her through her thin coat. He noticed. "Let's go," Julian said gently. "We have a long day tomorrow." She met his eyes, steady, unreadable, but not unkind. And for the first time, it truly hit her. She wasn't alone anymore, not tonight, not for the year ahead, and nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The next morning, Elena woke to quiet she didn't recognize. Not the thin, echoing silence of her old apartment, but a warm, insulated stillness, like the world existed somewhere far beyond the walls. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she opened her eyes. The penthouse ceiling stretched high above her, soft morning light pouring through sheer curtains. Maya slept biased on the massive bed, curled into a tiny warm ball under the thick duvet, breathing peacefully. Elena couldn't remember the last time her daughter slept so soundly. She brushed a strand of hair from Maya's forehead, letting that single small comfort settle into her chest before reality pressed back in. She was married to a billionaire she barely knew, living in a home that felt like it belonged in a movie set. And today she had to learn how to exist in it. She stepped into the living room carrying Maya on her hip, her blanket draped over Elena's shoulder. Julian was already there, not dressed in a suit, not surrounded by assistants or screens, just standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows with a cup of coffee in hand, sleeves rolled up, shoulders slightly slumped, like a man who hadn't yet decided how to carry the weight of the day. When he turned, the exhaustion was still in his eyes, but so was something more grounded, almost human. "Good morning," he said. "Morning," Elena replied, unsure where to stand, unsure what she was now allowed to touch. Julian gestured to the table. "I had breakfast brought up. There's something for Maya, too." Elena's chest tightened. He'd thought about Maya again. She set her daughter down gently, letting the little girl waddle toward the small bowl of fruit and soft oats placed at the corner of the table, exactly her size, arranged with surprising care. "You didn't have to do all this," Elena murmured. "I know," Julian said quietly, "but I wanted to make things easier this morning." She studied him, calm voice, direct words, no pretense. But beneath it, she sensed the same unsettled tension beneath her own ribs. Two strangers bound by law, by survival, by timing neither asked for. After breakfast, Julian walked her through the penthouse, not as a tour guide, but as someone trying to give her control over a space that didn't belong to her yet. The narrow hallway, the private elevator entrance, the quiet office behind glass, the rooms too pristine to imagine children running through. "What do you expect from me here?" she finally asked. Julian paused. "Nothing," he said. "Just live as yourself the way you always have." She wasn't sure how to do that, surrounded by marble countertops and a view that swallowed the city whole, but she appreciated the answer. After a moment, she said softly, This place is too quiet. Julian glanced up. Too quiet? I can't sleep without noise. The city, trains, cars, a TV, something. Silence feels like pressure. He absorbed that for a beat, then nodded. I'll fix it. Not the dismissive, I'll handle it, she expected from men in power. A genuine promise. That night, Elena lay awake in the darkened room, Maya asleep beside her again. The penthouse was still, almost too still, like the world outside had been muted. Then suddenly, a low rumble filled the room. The faint hum of passing traffic, the distant rhythm of subway lines, a soft layer of urban noise. Elena sat up. Julian had installed a sound generator. Subtle, realistic, comforting. She hadn't even heard anyone come in to set it up. She stepped into the hallway and found him in the living room, still awake, still in his shirt from the day, reading through a dense stack of documents. You did that? She asked quietly. He looked up, surprised she was awake, then nodded. You said silence felt heavy, he replied simply. It shouldn't. Something inside her wavered, not attraction, not affection, just recognition. Two people living in different versions of emptiness, trying in their own awkward ways to keep the darkness at bay. Later, as she passed by the open door of his office, she heard his voice. Low, steady. No, I won't change the timeline. Yes, Marcus will push. He always does. No, he doesn't know about the marriage yet. I'll be ready. A pause, a softer tone. No, don't worry, I won't lose the company. Elena froze, listening. When the call ended, she pretended to be adjusting the blanket on her shoulder and stepped out of the room. He stopped when he saw her. You heard, he said, not accusing, not defensive. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. It's fine. Their eyes met, his guarded, hers searching. Is this really that dangerous? She asked. Yes, Julian answered truthfully, because of Marcus. Because of everything Marcus is willing to do, he said. A chill drifted between them, quiet but unmistakable. For the first time, Elena fully understood the stakes. Her decision last night hadn't just saved her life. It had tied her to a man standing at the edge of his own war, and the doors to that war were already beginning to open. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm, one Elena never imagined living, yet somehow learned to navigate with quiet resolve. In the morning, she made breakfast for Maya while the penthouse filled with soft city noise from the generator Julian had installed. Oddly enough, it gave the place life. It made it feel less like a museum and more like a home she hadn't agreed to claim. Julian left early for meetings. He always paused before walking out the door. Never long enough to call it hesitation, but long enough to show he wasn't used to leaving someone behind. Elena noticed. She noticed too much. By afternoon, the silence returned. She wandered through the enormous space, trying not to feel swallowed by it. She put on her only pair of clean jeans, tied her hair up, and washed dishes by hand, even though the kitchen had a dishwasher newer than her entire old apartment building. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to fit in. She was trying to stay herself. On the third day, she found the documents, not hidden, not locked away, just spread across the dining table in organized stacks marked with color-coded tabs. At first, she wasn't interested. Corporate reports meant nothing to her anymore. She left that version of her life behind when her husband got sick. But a single line caught her eye, an old habit sparking awake, sharp and involuntary. Container weights, number sequences, declared mass versus verified mass. It wasn't the content, it was the pattern. An uneasy chill rippled across her spine. She sat down, scanned a sheet, then another, her breath slowing as she recognized something she hadn't expected to see again. The numbers violated Benford's law, not just slightly, significantly. Someone was fabricating data. Someone was lying. Someone was manipulating shipments under Julian's watch, and doing it well. Her fingers tightened on the pages. This wasn't a mistake. It was a system. Footsteps approached. She turned. Julian stood in the doorway, jacket off, tie loosened, fatigue clinging to him like a shadow. He paused when he saw her leaning over the documents. Elena, he asked carefully, what are you doing? She held up the page, looking at something you should have caught months ago. His brow tightened, but he didn't scold her. He didn't pull the papers away. He just stepped closer. What did you find? She placed the sheets on the table and spoke with the calm precision of someone who had once lived in spreadsheets and audits before life taught her other kinds of pain. These container weights, they don't follow natural distribution. Whoever filed them manipulated the first digits. She flipped to another document. The verified gross mass doesn't match the declared mass. Not even close. These shipments are wrong, Julian. Not sloppy wrong, intentional wrong. He stared at her, really stared, as if seeing a part of her he didn't know existed. And what does that tell you? That someone is creating fake volume, she said. Fake shipments, fake metrics. They're inflating revenue by pushing empty containers or altered manifests. A sharp silence cracked between them. Julian exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. I thought the losses were due to mismanagement, he said. They're not losses, Elena replied. They're theft. He turned away for a moment, bracing his hands against the counter, shoulders rising and falling with a breath he didn't finish. Elena, this is serious. I know, she said quietly. He turned back toward her. No, you don't. If Marcus is doing this, it's not just fraud. It's federal crime. It could destroy everything. Ether, my family's legacy, thousands of jobs. And if he knows you're looking into this, he'll come after you. She held his stare unflinching. He won't know. Julian stepped closer, voice low. Why would you get involved in this? This isn't your fight. Elena felt something deep in her chest tighten. Not fear, not duty, but a quiet truth. Because someone is lying to you, and she said, and you've built your whole life trying not to become the kind of man who looks the other way. His expression shifted slowly, painfully, as though her words hit a part of him he rarely let anyone see. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then with a small nod, he said, show me everything. And just like that, they became a team. Not by romance, not by trust, but by necessity. Two people standing at the edge of a maze built from secrets, ready or forced, to walk into it together. As the city lights flickered across the glass walls around them, Elena realized something she hadn't expected. Their marriage had started as a contract, but this was the first thing they were doing as partners. That night, the penthouse felt different. The lights were dim, the city glowing against the windows like 1,000 unanswered questions. Papers covered the dining table in careful stacks. Elena's notes on the left, Julian's internal reports on the right, and a growing pile in the center that represented the truth neither of them wanted to face. Julian loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and dropped into the chair across from her. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked less like a man built from marble and more like someone who was deeply, unmistakably human. Walk me through it, he said. Elena nodded. She spoke clearly, each word cutting through the quiet like a steady blade. She pointed to the manifest. The fraud starts here. The containers are being logged as full, but the verified mass is too light. She tapped another sheet. The digital trail is rerouted through 3 different departments. They're burying false data inside legitimate shipments. Nobody's looking because every division thinks the numbers belong to someone else. Julian's jaw flexed as he absorbed it. And the shell company? Truck Solutions, she said, and they receive the payments from these ghost shipments. The account structure is too clean, too sophisticated. Someone inside knows exactly how to exploit your system. Julian leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Elena, this is coordinated. This took months, maybe years. She didn't sugarcoat it. It took access, high-level access. His eyes lifted to hers. Marcus. It wasn't a question. It was the first raw admission. Elena didn't respond right away. She needed him to come to the truth on his own. Julian let out a breath, a slow, controlled exhale of a man who'd suspected the answer long before he was ready to face it. He's been trying to force the board into giving him more control, Julian said. He called the last quarter's losses my negligence. He's been waiting for an opportunity. This is his opportunity, Elena replied quietly. And my fault, Julian murmured. She stopped, looked at him carefully. Why would you think that? Because I trusted him, Julian said. Because while I was trying to keep the company alive, he was building a way to carve it out from under me. I should have seen it. There was no arrogance in his voice, just the exhausted clarity of a man who had been carrying everything alone for too long. Elena shook her head. This isn't your failure. This is his deceit. Those aren't the same. Something in his expression faltered just for a second, like her words hit a place he'd boarded shut. He stared at her, almost searching her face to see if she meant it. She did, and that small certainty softened something inside him he hadn't intended to reveal. Hours passed. They worked side by side, papers spread across the table like the pieces of a puzzle no one wanted to complete. At some point, Maya awoke and toddled out of the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. She walked straight to Julian with the unfiltered trust only children possess. He froze, surprised, but then lifted her gently onto his lap. Elena watched from across the table as her daughter curled against him, small fingers gripping his shirt, eyelids drooping again. "Sorry," Elena whispered. "She usually sleeps longer." "It's fine," Julian said softly. "She's safe here." His hand rested steady against Maya's back. A simple gesture, a quiet one, but it landed in Elena's chest with more weight than she expected. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't performing. He just cared, instinctively, effortlessly, and that, more than anything, made her breath tighten. When Maya finally fell asleep again, Julian carried her to the bedroom with a gentleness that didn't fit the man the world painted him to be. When he returned, Elena was standing near the window, staring at the city lights with a complicated expression, fear, resolve, and something unspoken. Julian stepped beside her, leaving enough space for her to move away. She didn't. "Elena," he said quietly, "you didn't have to help me." She looked at him. "Maybe not, but I know what happens when people in power get away with hurting others. I know what it looks like when greed rots something from the inside." He held her gaze steady and open. "You deserve more than this mess," he murmured. "You deserve more than carrying it alone," she replied. For a moment, neither spoke. The city stretched endlessly below them, but the silence between them felt close, intimate, almost warm. Then Julian said what had been lingering all night. "Marcus is going to fight back, and he doesn't fight fair." Elena answered with equal honesty. "I've been fighting unfair battles my whole life." A faint, involuntary smile touched his lips. Small, quiet, real. And for the first time since their strange, impossible marriage began, Julian didn't feel like the only one standing on thin ice. He had someone beside him, someone he hadn't expected, someone who didn't break, someone who didn't flinch from truth, someone he could trust. And somewhere beneath the corporate war gathering around them, beneath the contract and the urgency and the fear, something new was starting to take root, something neither of them could name yet, but both of them felt it. Marcus Thorne always arrived early. He believed the first person in the building controlled the story of the day, and today he intended to write the entire narrative himself. His steps echoed sharply against the polished floor of Ether's executive wing. He greeted no one. He didn't smile. He simply moved swiftly, confidently toward the server room, where the overnight logs waited for him like an obedient subordinate. He opened the file and froze. New access signatures. Two. One expected, one not. Julian and someone else. His jaw tightened with slow, icy realization. The second signature wasn't from an executive or a board member or a finance lead. It belonged to an account recently activated. Elena Harper. Marcus leaned back slightly, a small, humorless smile forming. "So that's your angle, Julian," he murmured. "You brought in a ghost." He wasn't threatened. He was amused. But beneath that amusement, concealed even from himself, was a flicker of fear. Because if someone outside his circle had found the threads he'd buried, it meant the system wasn't as airtight as he'd built it to be. And worse, someone had given that outsider access. At the penthouse, Elena stood over the kitchen island, sorting through another stack of reports. She didn't hear the elevator open, didn't hear the footsteps. She only felt it, the sudden shift in the air, the presence behind her. She turned. Julian stood there, expression carved from stone. "What's wrong?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he held out his phone. Elena took it. On the screen was a message forwarded from legal. A flagged alert, unauthorized access attempt detected. User E.H. Harper. Her stomach dropped. "I didn't try to access anything new," she whispered. "I know," Julian said, her pulse hammered. "Then why?" "Because Marcus just found out about us," he said quietly. "About our investigation." The room seemed to contract around her, pulling tight, suffocating. "How?" Elena asked, trying to steady her voice. "Log review," Julian replied. "He checks everything. He always has, and now he knows I'm involved." "Yes." Her entire chest tightened. "Then he'll go after me," she murmured. A shadow crossed Julian's features. "He already is." They met that afternoon at Ether headquarters, a meeting Julian insisted they attend together. The boardroom felt colder than usual, every seat filled, eyes flicking toward Elena as if she were an intruder in a world she had no place in. Marcus sat at the far end, perfectly composed, fingers lightly drumming on the sleek table. When Julian entered with Elena at his side, Marcus stood with the unnatural smoothness of a predator who'd been waiting for the exact moment to strike. Well, Marcus said with a thin smile, this is unexpected. Julian remained silent, jaw tense. Marcus turned his attention to Elena, his smile tightening. And you must be Elena, our new addition. Elena felt the weight of the room pressing against her spine, but she didn't step back. Marcus circled slowly, shark-like. You know, he said conversationally, background checks are routine for anyone accessing internal systems, even spouses. The word spouses landed like glass shattering on marble. Elena's breath caught. Marcus continued, tone dripping with polished venom. Imagine my surprise when your file revealed a discrepancy. Julian stiffened. Marcus. Oh, don't worry, Marcus said, lifting a hand. I'm sure it was accidental. People make mistakes under pressure, especially when trying to buy medication. Desperate times, desperate measures. Elena froze, her throat went dry. He'd found it. The one mistake she'd made 2 years ago, the night her husband's pain spiked so severely, she forged a signature on an insurance form to get his medication faster. A mistake she lived with. A mistake she made for love. Julian turned sharply toward her, eyes wide with shock. Not disappointment, not judgment, just shock. Marcus smiled. A forgery, he said softly. A federal offense. Normally small, but with the right push, quite damaging. Elena's hands trembled. Not from guilt, from the realization that Marcus now held a weapon that could destroy her entire future, including Maya's. Julian stepped forward, voice razor sharp. If you go after her... Oh, come on, Julian, Marcus interrupted. It's not personal. She's simply leverage. The word cracked through Elena like a blade. Leverage. The one thing she begged Julian not to turn her daughter into. She looked at Julian, saw the desperation in his eyes, the conflict, the impossible choice forming in his silence. And Marcus saw it too. Here's the deal, Marcus said calmly. Divorce her, step down as CEO. I bury her record. Her daughter stays with her. No foster care, no charges. Elena's heart turned to ice. Julian inhaled sharply, chest tightening. But in that same second, Elena understood something. Marcus wasn't talking to Julian anymore. He was talking to her, because he knew she would never let Maya suffer because of her. Never. And before Julian could speak, before he could choose a fight that could ruin her life, Elena stepped back from him. Her voice was low, steady, breaking. Do it. Julian turned to her, stunned. Elena. End the marriage, she whispered. Now her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. This wasn't weakness. This was sacrifice. I won't let Maya pay for my mistakes, she said. I won't let your war destroy her life. Julian's breath shook. Elena, please don't do this. I can fix it. You can't fix what he's willing to break, she said softly. And then, in front of the entire boardroom and the man who wanted Julian's throne, Elena did the one thing that hurt more than anything she'd survived before. She walked away, and Julian watched her go, his world collapsing in a different direction than he ever expected. Elena didn't remember getting out of the building. One moment she was standing in a boardroom where her life had been dissected like a weak point in a negotiation, and the next she was pushing through the revolving doors of Ether Tower. The winter wind slammed into her face so sharply it felt like waking from a fever dream. She kept walking, past the security guards who had watched her enter as Julian Ether's wife, past the polished marble floors she'd crossed with quiet awe, past the place where her world had shifted. Now it was shifting again, but this time it felt like falling. She reached the curb and stopped only when her breath refused to come. Her hands shook uncontrollably, not because of Marcus, not because of the threat, but because of the look on Julian's face when she stepped away. He had looked at her like something had been torn out of him, like he was losing more than a battle, like he was losing her. And she'd done it anyway because she had no choice. Because this world, Marcus's world, didn't play fair, and her daughter deserved a mother who protected her at any cost. But the pain of it lodged in her chest like a splinter. She wiped her face quickly before tears could form, before her weakness could be witnessed by people who would forget her the moment she disappeared into the crowd. She walked fast, focused like a woman running from a fire she had willingly stepped into. When she reached the penthouse, she moved on instinct. She packed quietly, not looking at the walls she had only just started memorizing. She folded Maya's clothes, tucked her blanket into the bag, pressed her forehead to her daughter's soft hair as she lifted her from the crib. Maya stirred. Mama! Shh, it's okay, Elena whispered, voice cracking so slightly she hoped her daughter didn't hear. She left the key card on the table. The city noise generator hummed softly in the background, the sound she had needed to sleep, the sound he had installed just for her. It made her chest ache. When the elevator doors closed, the weight of the world closed with them. Julian returned hours later. The penthouse felt wrong immediately. Too still, too empty, too cold. "Elena!" His voice echoed back at him. He checked the nursery, empty. The bedroom untouched except for a missing blanket. The table, one key card waiting like a silent goodbye. Julian closed his eyes, jaw clenching, grief and fury twisting inside him until he could barely breathe. Marcus had taken everything. Not just control, not just leverage. He had taken Elena, the only person who had stood beside him without asking for anything. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling for the first time in years. He hated how much it hurt. He hated that he understood her choice. He hated that she had made it for him. But most of all, he hated himself for letting her walk away alone. "Damn it," he whispered, voice cracking in the hollow room. He pressed a hand to his face. He couldn't go after her. If he did, Marcus would follow and Elena would pay the price. So he sat there in the quiet, in the emptiness, and the marriage that wasn't supposed to mean anything suddenly meant more than he could bear. Elena returned to her old building that night. The lights in the hallway flickered. The carpet smelled of dust and bleach. Nothing had changed, but she had, and the weight of that realization nearly buckled her knees. She placed Maya on the mattress, the same one she used before the penthouse, and sat beside her, pulling her daughter close as if she could shield her from everything waiting outside their thin, crumbling walls. Elena pressed a hand to her lips to keep from breaking. She had lost nothing she owned, but she had lost something she never expected to value. And now she was a liability, a wife in name only, someone Marcus had used and discarded in one move. Except as she unpacked the last of her things, her fingers brushed the small USB drive she had slipped into her pocket before leaving. The data, the logs, the anomalies, the first threads of the truth. Somewhere beneath the pain, something steadied inside her. Anger, resolve, a new kind of clarity. Marcus thought he had shut her down. He thought fear would keep her quiet. He didn't know her at all. Elena looked at Maya, sleeping safely, breathing softly, and whispered into the dim light, "I'm not done." She reached for her laptop. Tonight, she wasn't a wife or a victim or a woman running. Tonight, she was the version of herself life had tried to strip away. A fighter, an analyst, a woman who could see through lies like glass. And she was ready to burn Marcus Thorne's empire of lies to the ground. The next morning, Elena walked into the public library with Maya bundled against her chest and the USB drive clenched in her hand like a lifeline. The library was warm, quiet, and bright in a way her apartment never had been. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, dust motes floating gently in the beams. The scent of old pages wrapped around her like a faint, familiar comfort. She chose a corner desk, one with a clear view of the entrance, and sat Maya down beside her with a coloring book the librarian had offered. Maya scribbled peacefully, humming to herself. Elena opened her laptop. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just about survival now. It was about truth. It was about reclaiming the power Marcus had stolen from her hands. She inserted the USB drive. Lines of data filled the screen. Numbers, logs, weight manifests, timestamps. She'd seen the patterns before, but now she needed more than numbers. She needed proof no one could dismiss or twist. Hard evidence, undeniable evidence, evidence even Marcus couldn't spin. And she knew exactly where to find it. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed, satellite infrared imaging, imaging, industrial sites, historical archive. The old instincts came back like muscle memory. Back when she trained in forensic accounting analysis, she'd been taught that money could lie, but heat couldn't. Factories that ran always showed thermal signatures. Energy spent always left a trace. If Marcus claimed Ether's factories were producing non-stop, the roof should glow on infrared scans. Every operation, every cycle, every claimed shipment should show heat. But she suspected the truth was colder, literally. The database loaded slowly. Libraries weren't built for speed, but at last, satellite images shimmered onto the screen. She input the dates Marcus had reported full production. The screen refreshed. Elena leaned forward, breath held. There was nothing. No bright spots, no heat signatures, no thermal bloom from machinery, Just steel rooftops sitting dark and cold under the sun. She clicked to the next date. Cold. Another. Cold. Another. Still cold. The factories Marcus boasted about weren't running. They hadn't been running at all. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her heart pounding. Ether's supposed high-output containers were empty. The revenue spikes, manufactured. The shipments, shell illusions. The entire empire Marcus was building, smoke. She scrolled through more images, faster now, the certainty crystallizing with each one. Her voice trembled as she whispered to herself, "You weren't making anything, you were just stealing." Her hands shook, not with fear now, but with fury. She downloaded the full set of images, overlaid them with the shipment logs, correlated them with electricity usage records available through public data, and built a timeline so clear, even a first-year investigator could follow it. When she finished, she sat back and exhaled shakily. She had it. The truth Marcus had buried. The truth Julian had never been able to reach. The truth that could break the chokehold Marcus had on Ether. And suddenly a thought struck her, sharp and fragile. Julian. What was he doing now? Was he fighting alone? Was he blaming himself for losing her? Did he think she'd abandoned him? Her chest tightened painfully. She hadn't left him. She'd left the battlefield where she had no armor. But now she finally had a weapon. A small tug on her sleeve snapped her back. "Mama, look," Maya whispered, holding up a messy drawing of a house with 3 people standing in front. One was her, one was Elena, one was noticeably taller, drawn with straight lines and sharp shoulders. "Mama, that's the nice man." Elena stared at the drawing. Something warm and crushing rose in her throat. She kissed the top of Maya's head. "Yeah, baby," she whispered. "That's him." But when she lifted her eyes again, something in them had changed. The fear was gone. The exhaustion, too. What remained was resolve, clean, sharp, and unbreakable. She gathered the documents, the images, and the timeline she'd built. Then she zipped the laptop bag with a quiet finality. "It's time," she murmured. "Time to stop running." She lifted Maya into her arms, kissed her cheek, and stepped out of the library. And the moment she walked into the cold air, she felt it. The shift, the turning of the tide. She wasn't going back to Julian empty-handed. She was going back with the truth. And she was going to use it to burn Marcus Thorne's empire of lies to the ground. The boardroom felt like a storm waiting for lightning. Every seat was filled, every whisper sharp, every expression tight with anticipation. The vote to remove Julian Ether as CEO was minutes away, and Marcus sat at the head of the table like a man savoring victory before he swallowed it whole. Julian stood alone near the window, posture straight, but breath uneven. He wasn't defeated, not yet, but the weight pressing against him was visible. The murmurs grew, financial negligence, unstable leadership, a scandal waiting to break. Marcus raised a hand, silencing them with a smug ease. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is necessary for the company, for the shareholders, for our future." He looked at Julian with a polite smile that hit a knife. "The trust expires at midnight. Your marriage has crumbled, predictably. Your judgment is compromised. I suggest you step aside gracefully." Julian didn't respond. He stared at the skyline, jaw tight, fingers curled at his sides. He had no proof, no backup, no Elena. And that last thought tightened something in his chest until it hurt to breathe. He wasn't angry at her decision, just the emptiness it left behind. Marcus cleared his throat, ready to deliver the final blow. "If there are no objections," the doors slammed open. Every head snapped toward the sound. Elena Harper stood in the doorway, breathing hard, clutching a laptop against her chest and a stack of documents in her free hand. Her hair was windswept, her coat dusted with snow, her cheeks flushed with cold and fury, but her eyes were steady, sharp, unshakable. The room froze. Julian's breath caught in his throat. "Elena," he whispered, unable to stop the name from slipping out. She didn't look at him. Not yet. She stepped forward with the calm confidence of someone who had clawed her way back from fear and now carried truth like armor. Marcus recovered first. "Well," he said with a thin smile, "this is awkward, Mrs. Ether, unless you're here to confirm that your husband—" "Sit down," Elena said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the boardroom with the precision of a blade. Marcus blinked. The room stared. Julian's chest tightened with something that felt dangerously like hope. Elena placed her laptop on the table and connected it to the screen. I have evidence of systemic fraud, she said, not by Julian, by Marcus Thorne. A gasp rippled across the room. Marcus chuckled softly, feigning amusement. This is adorable. Really? You found some spreadsheets and think you know how manufacturing works? Elena clicked. Satellite images filled the screen. Cold rooftops, time-stamped, cross-referenced. I didn't find spreadsheets, she said. I found heat signatures. She pointed at the image. On every date, Marcus reported full factory output. The thermal scans show zero activity, nothing running, nothing producing. The factories were dead. Silence slammed into the room. Elena continued. These empty shipments were routed through Trox Solutions, a shell company Marcus controls through blind proxies. Every ghost container, every falsified weight report, every fabricated invoice, it all leads back to him. Marcus's smile vanished. A board member leaned forward, voice shaking. Is this authenticated? Yes, Elena replied. Cross-verified with public energy logs and internal shipment manifests. Satellites don't lie. Her final words hit like a hammer. Marcus shot to his feet. This is outrageous. She forged this. Enough, Julian's voice rose, steady and commanding. He stepped forward, eyes locked on Marcus. All the exhaustion burned away. You framed me. You threatened her. You used Elena's past to manipulate a vote you never deserved. Marcus' face drained of color. A board member whispered sharply, call legal. Another. Freeze his access. Another. This is criminal. Security entered without being asked. Marcus backed away from the table, voice cracking as he tried to salvage the wreckage. You can't do this. This company, I built. You stole, Julian said, and you're done. Security escorted Marcus out, his protests fading down the hallway like the last echo of a collapsing empire. The boardroom dissolved into murmurs, action items, legal alerts, auditors rushing to secure evidence. But Julian saw none of it. He saw only Elena standing across the room, breathing hard, shaken, but unbroken, holding herself together with the strength she'd always had, just never been allowed to use. He crossed the room slowly, stopping in front of her. Elena, he said quietly, you came back. She finally met his eyes, and this time she didn't look away. I couldn't let him destroy you, she whispered. Not when I had the truth. Something warm, sharp, and overwhelming flickered through Julian's chest. Not even after what I said in that room, he asked. She swallowed, her voice softened. You were trying to protect me. I know why you pushed me away, and I know it broke you to do it. Julian exhaled, a sound of relief and grief tangled into one. Elena, he said again, this time with emotion he couldn't hide. I'm sorry. She shook her head. Save it, she whispered. We're not done yet. Not until Marcus is gone for good. And together in the boardroom where everything nearly fell apart, they turned toward the future. Not as strangers, not as a contract, but as something forged in truth and fire. Partners. In the hours after Marcus was removed from the building, Ether Tower hummed with the frantic energy of truth finally breaking through the surface. Legal teams rushed between offices. Board members spoke in hushed, urgent voices. Security escorted boxes of documents for evidence review. But in the center of all of it, Elena and Julian stood still, not because the world around them paused, but because they did. For the first time since their forced marriage, the chaos didn't push them apart. It pulled them closer. They stepped out of the boardroom together, the doors closing behind them with a soft thud that sounded strangely final, like the end of a chapter neither of them wanted, but both had survived. Elena leaned against the wall, finally allowing herself to breathe, her pulse slowing after hours of holding it all inside. Julian watched her silently, grateful, struck, a little unsteady. You didn't have to come, he said quietly. You didn't owe me anything. Elena looked up. Her expression wasn't angry, wasn't bitter, just honest. I know, she said. I didn't come because I owed you. He swallowed, throat tight. Then why? She held his gaze for a long moment, long enough for him to feel every word she was about to say. Because you were worth coming back for. Julian's breath faltered. A simple sentence, but it struck deeper than anything he'd heard in years. He stepped closer, carefully as if approaching a truth he wasn't sure he deserved. Elena, you didn't see yourself in that boardroom. You didn't see the way they listened to you. You were the only one who could cut through Marcus' lies. You were terrified, she whispered. Brave, Julian corrected gently. Braver than anyone in that room. Her throat tightened again, eyes glossy but steady. "And you?" she asked softly. "How are you holding up?" His answer wasn't polished or poised. He let the truth slip through the cracks. "I was losing everything," he said. And then you walked in. Something tender flickered between them. Not romance, not obligation, something real. The kind of connection built from shared battle scars. Hours later, the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the lobby as the building slowly emptied. Elena stood by the entrance with Maya in her arms, the exhaustion of the day settling into her bones. Maya rested her head on her mother's shoulder, thumb in her mouth, sleepy and warm. Julian approached, hands in his pockets, looking different now. Not like a CEO at the end of a war, but like a man trying to be careful with something precious. "You should get her home," he said softly. Elena nodded. "I will." Julian hesitated. "Elena?" He exhaled. "I need to give you something." She frowned slightly. "What is it?" "A choice." He looked down, then back at her with a sincerity she'd never seen in him before. "You don't owe me a marriage. And after what happened, I won't hold you to the contract. You're free, completely." "If you want out," she whispered. He went silent. She shifted Maya on her hip and stepped a little closer. "Julian, you didn't force me into anything. I agreed because I needed to protect myself and my daughter. But I stayed because I saw the truth about you, about what you were fighting." He looked away for a second, jaw tight with emotion he wasn't used to showing. "You shouldn't stay out of obligation," he said roughly. "I'm not." He met her eyes, and for the first time since they met, there was no shield between them. No contract, no urgency, no strategy, just two people caught in the quiet after a storm. "What do you want?" Elena asked, her voice steady. Julian swallowed. "I want you safe," he said first. She shook her head gently. "Not what I asked." He took a slow breath. Then the truth came out in a voice barely above a whisper. "I want a chance, a real one, with you, with Maya, whatever that looks like. But only if you want it to." The world seemed to hold its breath. Elena looked down at her daughter, soft, sleepy, innocent. She brushed Maya's cheek. Then she looked back at Julian with eyes that no longer held fear, only clarity. "I don't want the contract anymore," she said. His face paled slightly. "Then you're leaving?" "No," she murmured. She stepped close enough for him to feel her warmth. "I want a new agreement." His brows drew together, confused. "What kind of agreement?" Elena's voice was soft, steady, but carried the weight of a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. 50-50, she said, "in the company and in everything else." Julian inhaled sharply, and for the first time since his father died, since the trust, since the board battles, since the loneliness, he laughed quietly, warmly, like something finally broke open inside him. He stepped down forward and cupped the back of her head gently, pressing at his forehead into hers. Not a kiss. Not a claim. Just a shared breath between two survivors. 50-50, he whispered. "Deal." Elena closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. For the first time in years, she felt the ground beneath her feet steady. A partnership built not from fear or desperation, but from fire, truth, and choice. And somewhere in the soft hum of the lobby lights, in the warmth of Julian's quiet laughter, in the weight of her daughter sleeping safely in her arms, Elena realized they hadn't just survived the maze. They had rebuilt the exit together. Winter melted slowly into early spring, and with it, the sharp edges of Elena's old life softened into something warmer, something she still struggled to believe was hers. The new apartment wasn't a penthouse. Julian insisted she choose a place where she felt she belonged, where the air didn't echo, where silence didn't feel like a weight. She chose a sunlit, modest unit near a park, quiet, safe, close to Maya's school. He bought the building to guarantee security, but never said a word about it unless she asked. Elena built her days from scratch, piece by piece. She joined Ether's internal audit division, not because of her marriage, but because she'd earned a reputation as the woman who dismantled Marcus Thorne's empire with satellite images and a spine that didn't bend. Her office overlooked the projects she now directed. Teams who trusted her, respected her, followed her lead. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was shaping something. And Julian, he visited often, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with Maya's favorite snacks, with coffee just the way Elena liked it, with that quiet, steady presence that said he wasn't going anywhere unless she told him to. They remained married on paper. Neither rushed to define what they were becoming, but neither walked away. Some evenings he stayed for dinner. Some nights, Elena found herself laughing at a joke he muttered under his breath while helping Maya build a crooked pillow fort. Some mornings she woke to a message he left before dawn. Board meeting at 9. Wish you were here to glare at them with me. Life wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. One late afternoon, Elena found Julian at the park near her building. He stood by the lake, hands in his pockets, watching Maya chase pigeons with fierce determination and zero coordination. Elena walked up beside him, the warmth of the setting sun glowing across his profile. "You're early," she said. "I wanted to see you," he replied simply. "Not rushed, not nervous, just honest." She smiled softly. "Long day." He nodded once. "Your team asked if you can sit in on the budget review next week. They're scared of messing up the numbers after your reputation." "My reputation?" Elena raised an eyebrow. Julian's lips curved faintly. "You see patterns no one else sees," he said. "It's intimidating." "Is that a compliment?" "It's the highest one I've given anyone." Her chest warmed, quiet and deep. "Mama, look!" Maya yelled, holding up a leaf with the triumph of discovering treasure. Elena waved back, laughter touching her voice. Julian watched the two of them, mother and daughter, framed under soft golden light, and something gentle broke open inside him. "Elena," he said quietly, almost hesitant, "can I ask you something?" She turned to him. "Anything." He exhaled through a shaky smile, the most vulnerable she had ever seen him. "Do you still want the 50-50 rule?" She nodded. "Of course." He reached for her hand, not grabbing, not claiming, just offering space for her fingers to close around his if she wanted. "And what about everything else?" His voice dropped. Her breath caught in her chest. She looked at him. Not the CEO, not the man she agreed to marry for survival, not the stranger who first entered her life through a wrong number message, but the man who had stood with her in every fire and let her stand with him in his. She slid her hand into his, warm, sure, certain. 50-50, she whispered, in everything. The relief in Julian's smile was almost heartbreaking. He leaned his forehead gently against hers, a soft exhale escaping him. Not a kiss, not yet. Something quieter, more intimate, the beginning of something earned. Maya charged toward them at full speed, shouting, "Mama, look at my leaf family." Elena and Julian broke apart, laughing as she barreled into their legs. Julian crouched, letting Maya shove the leaf into his hand. "It's perfect," he said and meant it. Elena watched them, her daughter, her accidental husband. This impossible moment that had somehow become her life. A life built from a message for the dead. A life rebuilt from broken pieces. A life she chose with someone who chose her back. Somewhere above the lake, city lights flickered on, soft and warm against the rising dusk. Elena reached for Julian's hand again. This time he clasped it without hesitation. And in the glow of the fading day, with Maya laughing between them and the future stretching open like a new beginning, they walked forward together, 50-50. In the quiet despair of a wrong number text, a weary single mother found herself entangled with a billionaire's world of power and deception. Not through fate's cruelty, but through the raw honesty that pierced his guarded heart. Elena's story teaches us that life's most profound transformations often bloom from our deepest vulnerabilities, where a simple act of reaching out in pain can shatter walls we never knew existed. It's a reminder that true strength isn't in solitary endurance, but in daring to trust another soul, even when the stakes threaten to break us. Amid betrayal and corporate storms, love emerges not as a rescue, but as a partnership forged in fire, proving that when we choose authenticity over fear, we don't just survive, we rewrite our destinies. In the end, it's the quiet courage to say yes to the unknown that turns strangers into saviors and broken lives into something beautifully whole. What unexpected twist in your life taught you the power of vulnerability and trust? Share your heartfelt story in the comments below. Your words could inspire someone facing their own storm tonight. And if this tale touched your soul, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community of dreamers who believe in love's unlikely paths. Let's keep uncovering life's hidden miracles together.